Hello, welcome everybody. Today I am very happy to welcome a new guest to the show, and that is Jeffrey Thomas. Jeffrey Thomas, you may know, is popular for writing the Punktown short story collections and novels. And I got my stupid thing on here. All right. And Thomas, or sorry, Jeffrey, would you like to introduce yourself quickly?
Sure, Jeffrey Thomas, and yeah, I write a lot of I write in the genres of science fiction and horror, but I like to mash those together, and usually I mash those together in my Punktown series. I've written since 2000. I've had quite a few Punktown books released, short story collections and novels. The first one was published by Jeff Vandermeer when he had his own small press called Ministry of Whimsy Press. And yeah, and my newest one is called The New God, and that's from Weird House Press.
Awesome. And also joining me tonight is my new friend, Ian Rogers. He was on the show about a month and a half ago,
Mhm.
and I really love his writing as well. Would you mind introducing yourself as well, Ian?
Yeah, my name's Ian Rogers. I've written some stuff, but I'm here tonight as a hardcore Jeffrey Thomas fan. So forget about my stuff. I'm here to celebrate Punktown and all things Jeffrey Thomas, because Jeffrey I've known since, especially his work from like the '90s when he was publishing in chapbooks and everything else. That's how I found him, and just immediately fell in love with his work, what he was doing with Cthulhu Mythos stories, and then his own Punktown stuff, which was just basically like taking the Cthulhu Mythos and dumping them in kind of like a Blade Runner-esque setting, which was just absolutely my jam. And it was just a great pleasure to me that we became friends later on. And eventually I was able to contribute a story to Transmissions from Punktown, a collection where a lot of authors got to sort of play in his sandbox, which was a great pleasure and honor for me. And I love those stories. They've influenced me so much in my own Blackland series, if not directly, then just how he writes them in such a way that makes them so accessible to the casual reader while sort of rewarding the super fan who's going to catch all these references. So he's sort of been my kind of like my mentor in that way, and just a real inspiration, and just a really hell of a nice guy. So
Nice. Now, before we get into Jeffrey Thomas, something interesting happened while I was organizing all this. In that we were talking about your book, and Jeffrey Thomas bought a copy. And have you read it yet,
Yes, I
Jeffrey?
did. Yeah, yeah, I finished it recently. I very much enjoyed it. Sycamore.
oh,
Sycamore,
thank
yeah.
you very much. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the book we were talking about when Ian was on the show a month
Mhm.
ago. Sycamore is really fun. I
Definitely, definitely.
absolutely adored it. And I can't wait for more.
Well, thank you. It's coming. There's another one this year and possibly two more next year. I'm trying to. I kind of want to be like the anti George R. R. Martin, where I'm not going to take 10 years to finish a book. Mine aren't the door stoppers that his are. So it's a full respect to him. But I
Fantastic.
do want to sort of have a regular stream of books that we don't want to flood the market, but you want to have something regularly so they also don't forget you. As you know, I'm sure as well, Jeff. You kind of got to at least remind people that you're alive out there. There's a lot of other books people can be reading.
Yeah, but your series screams for continuance.
Absolutely,
You
yeah.
can't stop. You can't finish Sycamore and not want that next one.
Well, thank you, thank you. It was a difficult book to write because it's as you know, it sort of has to be a lot of different things at the same time. It has to sort of, if there's only one book, it has to sort of stand on its own. I wanted to stand on its own anyway. I didn't want it to be full of all these cliffhangers and you'll have to buy the second book to do this. I want people to sort of, if they just enjoyed it, they enjoyed it. But if they want more, there's more. So that's why I keep saying it was a book that had to do a lot of things at once. But at the end of the day, I just hope that people really got a good kick out of the story. So thank you. That really means a lot. You know?
That
Yeah,
that's got to be a challenge, writing a book that's in a series, but making it so that it can stand alone on its own as well.
Well, and again, as I said, I was really I took a page, regardless of all my detective influences or the sort of paranormal procedural stuff of like the X Files or even Twin Peaks. I was really in the back of my mind, like Jeffrey Thomas was my Yoda going, no, no, you can do it. This is how I did it. And all I did was I would go back and I was already reading it. I'm pretty sure I've read every single thing in the Punktown series.
oh wow.
And I would just go back and reread it. And I'd just be like, oh, this is how he did that. I remember when I read the original Punktown collection and each story, um, almost had an Easter egg from the previous one. And I remember I emailed you about that, Jeff, and you said that I was one of the very few people who actually noticed that. Whether it was a product thing or a character reference or a neighborhood reference, it was like these little stepping stones throughout the entire collection. And I love stuff like that. It's like you're sharing a secret with the writer. You know, you're both sharing the same world, and just so accessible and so much fun and just so original. You know, I just like, you could say that it's this meets that, but until you actually read it and discover like how wonderful the world is, I mean, it's one of those series where I just keep telling people it's one I recommend most. And when they say, well, which should I start with? I'm like, it doesn't matter. Whichever one you can find, buy that and start from there. And that's part of the joy of the series, in my opinion. One of the many joys.
I appreciated in the back of Sycamore where you had said that you had mentioned Punktown and how the Punktown stories can all be read individually. You don't need to read another one to understand this one. You can just read one. You can read them all, and I like that approach a lot. And because I get intimidated myself with series. Sometimes something will sound very interesting, and then I'll read that it's the first in a trilogy or something, and I'll get kind of put off. I feel obligated if I'm going to have to follow this plot line, and I would rather read like the Felix Wren, the Black Lands books, where I can read them out of sequence. I can read all of them or one of them or whatever, and then you feel less pressured or less, you know, you can read that, you can go away, read something else, and so that's what I wanted to provide with people, so they didn't feel intimidated at all with my Punktown stories.
Well, that was definitely something that I had a lot of conversations with Dan Franklin at Cemetery Dance, who's a big fan of the series and obviously is really invested in it. And we both agreed, because it was one of the things that I said, that like there's no numbers on these books. This isn't book one, this isn't book two. I want people to be able to sort of like the next book in the series is a reprint of Supernatural Tales that came out like 10 years ago, which was a collection of the very early Felix Wren chapbooks with a story that actually takes place right after the end of Sycamore. So Supernatural Tales is being reprinted this year with a new cover, the same stories, but it's kind of cool because it's actually a prequel and a sequel to Sycamore. So I think of it as book zero, actually. It's not really book two. Book two will be coming next year, so the one I'm writing right now, and it's really picking up from the storylines of Sycamore. And there are character arcs and there are story arcs, but again, you could still read book two on its own if that's the first one that you pick up. And if you go back to Sycamore, you're not really going to be missing out on anything. So it's like with your stuff, Jeff, like you've had a few recurring characters in Punktown, but you don't need to have read Red Cells and then go to the other stories with your shape-shifting detective character and be like, oh, I read these out of order, I'm screwed. This is, you know, I'm screwed here. It's like, no, I was happy to see. It's like bumping into a friend on the street when it's like, oh, so like even the references that I caught in the New God. It's been a little while. I was trying to remember what the last Punktown book you did before the New God, and I'm not sure if it was Red Cells or not, but I caught stuff like the Color Train. I caught obviously the neighborhoods. I'm very familiar with the geography of Punktown itself, but again, it was like coming home in a way and seeing your favorite hangouts and meeting some of your favorite people. It was so fun, you know.
Before we go on, I just want to thank you, Ian, because you sent me these books, and that's really awesome.
I have
that.
I've read that.
You know, one thing I love about having a channel like this is that you learn about new authors all the time, and sometimes it's like, how did I not find this person earlier? You know what I mean? Like, but
I can't do that for Jeff. I wish I could have the camera here, but my Jeffrey Thomas shelf is right there, and it's filled because I've got all the standards. I've got a lot of limited editions, and I even have the super rare Fall of Hades, the little the sculpture of the gun, the smart gun that painted and everything. I even have one of those. So it's like, awesome. And I've even got a copy of the super rare. Is it the Dream Catchers or the Dream Masters? Your Freddy Krueger book.
Oh, the Dream Dealers.
Dream Dealers. That's what you can't find anywhere. So it was like I don't remember how I found it, but
yeah, those go for a lot these days if you could find them.
The funny thing with me is the only physical book of yours I own, Jeffrey. Everything is like 99%. I have a lot of your books on ebook because I'm a big e-reader because, well, books have like really overtaken my home. And but I do have one of yours, and it's one that you co-wrote with your old friend W.H. Pugmire, Willem.
Yes.
And I have Encounters with Enoch Collin.
It's funny that you mentioned that book, because that's the latest thing that I've been working on. Is Dark Regions Press has gone out of business, and so my books with them have kind of orphaned. And
Mhm.
I recently re-released one myself called Nocturnal Admissions, and I brought that up myself. But then I thought, well, what am I going to do with my Enoch Coffin stories? I don't have Willem unfortunately passed away in 2019,
Yeah.
and I don't have the rights to his work. His literary executor is S.T. Joshi,
Hmm.
and so I hope somehow his stories can stay in print. The only control I have is over my own stories. And Willem and I wrote that book together. We each wrote 6 stories about the same character. It was initially Willem's idea for this character, and he asked me to collaborate with him because he wanted the character as an artist, and Willem knew that I was an artist and wanted to bring that to the character. So he wrote 6 stories, and I wrote 6 stories about this character, Enoch Coffin.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as I say, I only have control over my own, and I wanted to keep them in print. So I was going to republish them myself, but then I offered the collection of just my stories to Weird House Press, and Joe Morey. He's very excited about it. And I had 2 other short stories that weren't in that book, but they mentioned kind of Coffin as a side character, so I put them in there. And then I just wrote a 40,000 word novella to flesh the book out even further. It's the first story I've written about that character for many years now. The original book came out, I think, in 2012. So it was fun to revisit that character. I read all my Enoch Coffin stories over again. I read Willem's stories over again, just to get into that headspace again. So I just turned that book over to Joe Morey, and I'm certain he's gonna want it. I know Joe.
Awesome.
And so that was the most recent thing I worked on. Was kind of I'm calling it the return of Enoch Coffin, because it's it's not quite the same as that book, but it's my contributions and more.
Yeah. Awesome. I've noticed, and one thing I admire about you is not too many people do this, but the books of yours that have gone out of print, you have been re-releasing. How has that experience been, and what has been like maybe the biggest challenge of doing that?
It's I'm so grateful that I can do that. When they go out of print, I want to keep them. I want to keep them in print. I want people to be able to still get them, and there hasn't been a whole lot of a challenge, because what I format them myself, and I acquire new artwork for the covers and so forth, and they definitely don't generate a lot of income, but it's just nice to know that they're still out there if people want to seek them out. And even a couple of my books that had the most readership, that had the greatest exposure, like my novels Deadstock and Blue War, when those went out of print, I was very grateful that I could keep them going. So it's just I think it's valuable that you can do that. A book doesn't have to vanish and be inaccessible anymore.
Yeah. And like I was saying, a lot of authors seem to not do that, despite that option being there. I think honestly, it's a good idea.
It might still be, maybe part of it is there's a kind of a stigma about self-publishing, and there shouldn't be, but I think the stigma derives from the fact that there's a lot of bad stuff that gets self-published, and it's hard to differentiate between what has value and what doesn't. But
well, and you're fairly established, so I feel like if you self-publish something, and especially if it's something that you're just trying to keep in print, I'm sure it's not even really viewed as a self-published book. It's more like no publisher has ownership, because the publisher no longer has the rights, or the publisher is no longer in business, and you're just trying to make it available. So I think that's if anything, I think it's a service to your fans, right? And I will say, like, especially with the care that you do it, you do such a really good job, and I love what Weird House has done with the new artwork, especially for the Hades series. I mean, I own all those books already, but there's a part who's like, oh, I got to buy them again because they look so good. And I think there was a bonus story in one of them. It's just like, I'll still have to go and buy them again, but they're never going to have this, I'm pretty sure, which is
That's wonderful. That's a sculpture that was done by Frank Walls of the
That's a
sentient
nice
gun.
little sculpture there, yeah.
Yeah, he did a beautiful job. I love his artwork. He's done the artwork on quite a few of my books by now. Like Ian just said, the new the reprints of the Hades series. Frank Walls did the covers for all of those, and he'll be doing the cover for the new Enoch Coffin book, and that was the sentient gun from my novel, The Fall of Hades.
Yeah. So
So
good.
there's a
I
limited
love
run
that
of it.
series too. And I guess it's just like I love the sprawl, like literally and figuratively of Punktown. But I also love there almost is really a beginning, middle, and end to the Hades story, where it's just like this is your view on heaven and hell and everything in between, making it almost it's very meat and potatoes. There's a metaphysical aspect to it, but you also have these people like Jesus and all these characters as people, as characters that are tangible in reality. Like it's when I was describing, I sold my own Angels and Demons story to PS Publishing. They published it last summer, and the way that I described it as that it's this crime religious noir, and I was trying to say like, well, what if oh my God, his name escapes me. LA Confidential.
James Ellroy?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
What if he had decided to rewrite the Bible as a crime epic? So he's like, it's all the characters, and they're just doing things. Like imagine, the devil and his children, the seven deadly sins were sort of like Ocean's 11, but they're demons. So it was just trying to have fun with it, but also being very like it's not even blasphemous. I actually keep in line with what these people are according to the Bible, but it was just a way of sort of reapproaching this material and having fun with it the same way that other people like Richard Cadre or anyone else who's written about, even Good Omens, that Gaiman and Pratchett had done back in the 90s, just sort of having fun with Angels and Demons while actually sort of even honoring the text, but doing something different with it in a fantasy setting or noir or whatever. So what you did with the Hades series was sort of your take on it. Starting with, I believe it was Letters from Hades, and then correct me if I'm wrong, Letters from Hades, Beautiful Hell, and then there was the collection, and then there was Fall of Hades. I think that's correct.
Yes. Yep.
But it tells a full story there, and I just loved it. I was just immediately hooked because you've got different characters. It's not even following necessarily the same character through all of it. And Letters from Hades is told in, I think, largely journal entries. It is kind of like an epistolary book, as I recall, right?
Yes, exactly.
And I just love it. It takes up this guy has died. He is in hell. Here's how hell works. Here's sort of the hierarchy. And I was just hooked. Again, just another mythology where it was the same thing sort of with Punktown, where you sort of, if I describe it to you, you're going to say, oh, it's just like this. It's like, well, sort of, but you have to read it to realize that it's not like that at all. Jeff is doing his own thing with this, and it's truly special.
Thanks, Ian. That's kind of the tricky balance also with the Punktown stories. It's like, if you looked at Punktown, superficially, nothing stands out as being really revolutionary. It's aliens, all kind of a melting pot of aliens and flying cars and futuristic cities and so forth. But it's when you get down to the surface level and start, that's when hopefully it starts to have a little more idiosyncratic character, a little bit more uniqueness, and that's like you said with the Hades stories. Of course, Hades, hell, you've got demons and the damned and all that stuff. But then you get, when you look closer, that you see the individual characteristics of the series and so forth.
Well, and again, I think that's part of your strength as a writer, is that you're not obsessed over gadgets or setting. It all comes back to the characters, and for me, that's what always really stuck with the stories. And I can even go back to one of the very first times I was reading the original Punktown collection, and I think that there's even one story that deals with like a sorority house. I think, was it the Sisters of No Mercy?
Yeah.
I think it's like a sorority house on Punktown. It was just in Punktown, just like, this is, you've got detective characters. I remember it was like a Union Dick, I think is what the story is called.
Yeah. Yes.
So it's like it's again what I'm trying to do with the Blacklands. So yes, I'm telling a story with Felix Friend. I'm going to tell lots of stories about this Toronto-based PI, but I've got other characters. I've got a short story that I'm working on right now that takes place with the commercial fishing industry in the Bermuda Triangle. What that would be like just for the average Joe trying to make a living in a place where there's portals everywhere, right? So it goes completely sideways. But for me, I've always thought the Blacklands, and I think your Punktown series is very, very similar. Um, it's not the characters that you see over and over again. It's the world that's the real recurring character. You know,
Yeah.
like when my manager I was always trying to pitch Blackland stuff, and the way that we described it, because you have to reduce it down to its simplest idea for studio executives, right?
Yeah.
They don't read; they hire people. They actually hire people.
I like
that's
that.
that's how dumbed down you have to bring it sometimes. Not all the time. I'm not saying they're idiots, but they don't have time or they're just not readers. No judgment. No judgment.
Yeah.
For the Blacklands, I always say that it's a supernatural version of The Wire, because everyone knows The Wire, everyone loves The Wire, and I say this is a TV show that dealt with each season was a different group of people. It was the first season was the cops, the second season was the dock workers and the stevedores, the third season was the school system, the teachers, and then the journalists. Like every season focused on a different group of people, but the real recurring character was the city of Baltimore. How does this city run? And some people would come and go. It's like usually the cop characters are the same from season to season, but not always. But that was why it was so fascinating, because I'd never seen a show like that before, where people will come and go. You might never see them again, but it was really, this is how the city is the recurring character, in the same way that I feel Punktown is the real recurring character. Whether you're reading Blue Planet or Everybody Scream or a short story that you happen to just pick up in an anthology and you just see it. I always love when I read a short story, when I discover a Punktown story in a collection or in an anthology, and Jeff has got this way of mentioning it's Paxton, what some people will call Punktown. It's usually one line, and it's like that's all he'll give you. It's like, no, I have a story to tell here. This is my job, is to tell this story. You don't even need to know that there's 20 of these stories elsewhere. It's just like, this is my job, is to tell this story, and if you like it, maybe you'll pick it up and find somewhere else. And again, I had a story in a Tor Nightfire anthology called Screams from the Dark. Ellen Datlow bought this standalone Blackland story. It's not even a Felix Wren story. It was just a regular standalone Blackland story. And she liked it, and she put it at the very start of the book, because she said that she wanted that story to be the one that introduces the collection. And she knew it was Blacklands, and there was never any, I don't think people will get this. If it's part of a series, it will confuse people. She really believed in me, and she believed in the stories, and she knew what I was doing. And I think she even made a Punktown reference at one point, because I always correspond to her quite a bit. And I think that she knew exactly what I was doing, because I mean, no one's read more short stories than Ellen Datlow. So I think that she really got it, and I was like, yeah, I mean, everything that I'm doing is because of Jeff and what he what do they say, like he walks so that I can run. Is that the expression that people say these days? So not that I'm running, my stories are not nearly as successful as Jeff's, but I'm trying, and I wouldn't be doing it much less having the fun that I'm having with it if it wasn't looking back on your work, Jeff, and the fact that you're still doing it. I was so excited when the new God was announced, and it was like, oh wow, I'm gonna goggle this up. And it was Jason's idea to say we should read it together, see if we can get Jeff on this podcast and talk about the book.
Yeah, and it was our conversation, Ian, because I heard you on another podcast or YouTube channel, I can't remember what, and you were talking a lot about Jeffrey Thomas, and then it came up again in our discussion. And then we were talking more about Jeffrey Thomas after the show was over. And I was like, a couple days later, I just kind of clicked, why don't we get, like, he just released this new book I've been wanting to read because it's a Punktown novel. Why don't I just get us all together and we'll chat about the new God?
Yeah, it was just time. It was just all those things came together. I already had it. It was sitting on my pile, and of course, I'm a slow reader, but I knew I was going to get to it sooner than the other stuff. But it was you that made me really want to get to it at a time. And I don't know about you guys. I mean, let's face it, this year has not started off really great for a lot of people.
Yeah, no.
Personally and professionally, and just everything that's going on. It's just there's been a lot. So being able to read a book like Jeff's The New God was something. It was like, it's what I said before. It was like meeting old friends again, and it was just like, oh, it was like comfort reading, right? It was just like, even though it was a book I'd never read before, it wasn't a book I'd gone back to and I'm going to reread, like say The Stand for the 50th time. This was a new book by someone I really respected in a world that I was familiar with. I was like, oh, this is exactly the book I need to read right now. So being able to talk to both of you guys about it, this is definitely one of the highlights of the year for me right now.
Yeah.
I appreciate all your kind words, Ian.
Before we go on with the new God, can we, just so people know, I don't know if a lot of my audience know Jeffrey Thomas or Punktown. So Jeffrey, could you tell us a little bit about what Punktown is and how it relates to your latest novel, The New God?
Sure. Punktown, I've been writing about Punktown since 1980. it wasn't until a good many years later that I started publishing in the small press some Punktown work. But I've been writing about it consistently since 1980. And how I originally saw it was as a massive city on another planet that is populated. There are indigenous people, but it's largely populated by people, Earth colonists, but also a melting pot for aliens from everywhere. What I took my inspiration from, people, and I don't fault them for it, but people frequently compare Punktown to Blade Runner. But since I've been writing about it since 1980, it was several years before Blade Runner. Mm-hmm. But I admit that I took a lot of inspiration from the Mos Eisley spaceport in Star Wars. That was my favorite part of Star Wars, and I saw all these aliens and commingling and everything, and this kind of crime-ridden little town. And I thought I'd like to write about something like that, but on a larger scale, like a whole gigantic city, a megalopolis. And so I ran with that idea. And but right from the start, I knew that I didn't want to just write about the same characters. I guess a way to kind of compare it would be to say, like, in Rear Window, the entire movie takes place from Jimmy Stewart's point of view, and he's looking at that apartment building across the way, and he just looks at what's going on in this one and what's going on in that one, and everyone is telling a different story, and some stories are funny and some are tragic, and throughout the movie you're seeing these different stories play out. And that's kind of how it is with Punktown. Punktown is you can watch what's going on in this window for a while, and then what's going on in this window, and there are all these individual stories, and they're united by the fact that they're all taking place in Punktown, as in Rear Window, they're all taking place in the same building, but the people aren't necessarily interacting with each other. And so that's kind of has been consistently my approach throughout. And The New God is the latest in that series. And not all Punktown stories have a horrific component, but they often do. They usually do. But I like the freedom with Punktown that they can go one could be like a detective story, one can be more like a black comedy, and I frequently have brought in Lovecraftian kind of elements or feeling, but that by no means is that a consistent component in the Punktown stories either. Although in the New God, it's to the fore more so than in probably any of the other stories.
Yeah.
Did you confirm or deny that the title Punktown comes from Funky Town?
It does. The song Funky Town, yeah. In 1980, I was working in a shoe company, and it was very noisy, all the machines and everything, and radios. And that song came out around that time. Lips Incorporated, Funky Town? Is that?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And I would hear that, and because it was the era of punk rock, I thought they were saying, "Take me down to Punktown." And so that got stuck in my head, Punktown. And so even when I found out it was Funky Town, I had Punktown stuck in my head. And I told that one time I found the website for Lips Incorporated, and you could leave stories about how you encountered their music and whatever. And I wrote that little story about how I wrote a series of stories called Punktown because I was inspired by your song Funky Town, and they sent me a Funky Town T-shirt.
Nice.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. What was the very first thing? Like, where did Punktown come from? What did it come from, that song, or
that was where the title came from? Yeah.
No, but like the stories and the idea of it being like on a colonized planet.
It's just I don't know. I think it's just kind of a composite of all my influences growing up. Loving like science fiction, like Star Trek, and but also loving horror, like Outer Limits, and just all these influences, and I just felt like a place where I could mash all that together. Plus, social commentary it seems like it's a good canvas for that as well.
Yeah,
and I think that was what I was going to say, especially when I was reading New God. It was like a reminder that I mean, obviously, I love the mashup of sort of cosmic menace with science fiction, but what I feel like isn't really remarked on enough is the way that you explore sort of the social and psychological aspects of the way that things take a toll on characters in the Punktown stories.
Mm.
And I thought right away, I was reminded, like, oh, this is one of these reasons why I really love Jeffrey's work is um, club feel. You know, on the surface, just this ordinary dance club with loud music and bright strobing lights, but the floor is made of this synthetic human skin. And when the protagonist, when Colin Rex goes to order a drink from a table computer, he's surprised to see that instead of holograms and intangible control panels, it's controlled by like hand moves, like knobs and clunky buttons and everything. And for me, this is like a deliberate feature of the club that I saw in response to like the growing psychological malaise of the citizens of Punktown who feel disconnected from physical reality due to the exposure of holograms and other intangible media. And it's a small detail, but to me, it just really shows that Jeff's just, that you're doing something on a whole other level here. Even the argument of AI, like there's an AI, large component of AI in this story without really spoiling too much. I don't want to talk too much about the details of the book, but it was just so topical, so on point too, that it's just, again, it's, there's a social satire, but there's also a very deeply felt humanity that I was like, wow, this really resonates to me. And it's just like, it's been too long since I've been to Punktown, and of course I didn't want to hope, and it was something I was going to ask you later on, but like I'm hoping that is this going to be sort of like a precursor to more Punktown books, and are they going to come like sooner than the last one? I think the last one was Red Cells, which was quite a few years ago if I recall, but again maybe I'm wrong, but I may be hungry for more. It's I'm selfish that way with the series. So.
Yeah, I don't have any plans, but there's always the possibility. Whereas I have planned not to write any more Hades stories. I just feel like I've done everything I can with that. It's a little more. I feel that trilogy that has come out recently, the re-release volumes from Weird House Press. I think that's the. I want to just keep it all in those 3 volumes. Whereas, but with Punktown, to me, it's always it's a place I know I can always come back to again. And though I don't have any solid plans, I wouldn't be surprised if I did. And I wanted to point out that the New God has kind of an interesting history. Some years ago, there was a Kickstarter for a Punktown role-playing game. And that some people wanted to do. It was a guy named Mike Tresca was the one who really was kind of got that going. And I don't play role-playing games myself, so I'm sure I'll never play the Punktown role-playing game. I played Dungeons and Dragons once in my life with a friend. But the Kickstarter was successful, and the Punktown role-playing game came out. It's kind of obscure, but it's still out there. And this whole guidebook was put together. It's like a Punktown encyclopedia. And so there were some game scenarios in that volume, and one of them was by Brian M. Sammons, a fellow writer, and he also has done a lot of anthologies singly and also collaborating with people like Glenn Owen Barris. And so Brian his scenario in that guidebook was called "Looking Long into the Abyss." And Brian came to me and he suggested that we flesh that scenario out and write a novel to collaborate on a novel together. And so I agreed to that. And I wasn't sure how to. I typically don't really collaborate with people. My most successful collaboration was that one with W.H. Pugmire. But even then, it was kind of strange at first finding the right approach to that, because I'm not prone to collaboration. So we finally decided that I would write the first half of the novel, The New God. At the time, it didn't have a title, based on Brian's scenario, based on Punktown. So I wrote my first half, and then for various reasons, various personal reasons and so forth, Brian wasn't able to write the second half, and so I asked for his blessings to complete it myself, and he told me to go for it. And but I didn't get to it right away, and eventually Joe Morey of Weird House Press asked me if I could give him some kind of a Lovecraftian book. He thought that would be good, and then I thought of The New God, And I thought, instead of writing something new, I think I'm going to finally complete that. And by the time I got back to it and completed it, a span of, I can't remember if it was 9 or 10 years had passed.
Mm-hmm.
So even though I agree, it seems very topical because AI has a lot to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
It's based on that Brian's scenario, the basic plot setup. And so I have to credit Brian for that. He had a lot of foresight, I guess, about because. And another funny thing about this is, I like to cast actors in roles so I can have some kind of a mental picture what the character might look like, and I might not just for my own benefit. And so I saw and this is funny because Ian, in some interview that you did, you said you saw Max Wren as possibly being Ryan Gosling.
Yes, I did. I was literally just thinking of that right now. It's just like he's not a tough guy, because anyone who thinks he's a tough guy obviously hasn't read the stories that Felix gets his ass kicked more than he probably gets. He's definitely, like, it was funny when we were casting the audio person, when Spotify did the audio book, they were asking me for notes of who they should get, because they let me audition narrators, and one guy was doing like a Humphrey Bogart impersonation, which was like, no, that's absolutely not. And they said, well, can you tell us why? And I said, well, Felix is the anti-PI. And they said, that's perfect. So they went out and they picked someone who was really great. And that's why I thought of Ryan Gosling, was because you don't look at him and see that he's this big tough guy. I was actually thinking of him in Blade Runner 2049, because of course he's got the coat, he looks very PI even though he's a cop. And I was thinking, I was already picturing him, but like that's Felix. That to me is Felix. He can sort of take care of himself. He's not going to take on 5 guys, but even if he was a fair, you wouldn't look at him and see that about him. He's very unassuming that way,
Right. He's not like an Arnold Schwarzenegger or some imposing figure or something. Well, ironically, I pictured Ryan Gosling as the protagonist.
Oh man, that's incredible that you say that, because it was one of my questions. You go into a description of what Colin Rex, what he looks like, and I was like, God damn, that's Ryan Gosling.
Oh my God.
And so I couldn't help but think of Ryan Gosling throughout.
Well, that's why when I saw Blade Runner 2049, it was like, oh, for God's sakes, because not only that, but in New God, his love interest is an AI. She's like an AI ghost of his former lover. And I wrote that first half of the book 9 or 10 years ago. So it was before Blade Runner 2049.
Right.
So I thought, geez, should I just change this? And I thought,
there's those movies, like there's just as many movie crossovers as there are story crossovers. And I'll tell you a funny story, Jason, about me and Jeffrey here. We talked about before, because we would inadvertently have the same titles for stories. I have a story called Out of the Blue. He's got a story called Out of the Blue. And like, there was all kinds of stuff. So it's funny that you said, because you actually, when you were just describing Felix, Wren, you actually said Max Wren. I wouldn't want to correct you. But
I said Max Wren?
No. Actually, no, it's fine, because
I know that you took that.
The reason why I took the name, the very first Blackland story is Temporary Monsters, and it's full of movie Easter eggs. Because I'm a movie junkie, I love movie trivia. And Max Wren, and I call him Max Wren. Felix Wren's name comes from Cronenberg, and the character from Videodrome, which is my very favorite Cronenberg. The character in that movie is named Max Wren. And Max Wren comes from, David Cronenberg is a big car guy. He likes cars, he likes motorcycles. A Renmax is a German motorcycle that he loves. So he had this motorcycle called a Renmax, and so he just took the name and flipped it and said, well, I'm going to call my character in Videodrome Max Wren. So I took Felix Wren, just because Felix was actually the name of one of my favorite characters from John Stakely's novels, Vampires and Armor. He only wrote 2 books before he died, and they were fantastic. So, and both books had a character named Felix, no last name. And both books, one is a vampire hunters sanctioned by the Vatican, and Armor is basically Starship Troopers. It's a military science fiction. So they couldn't be further apart. But the books have both got this little, like, not even a warning, but a little note on the copyright page. This Felix is no other Felix. This Jack Crow is no other Jack Crow, because there's also a character named Jack Crow in both books. And for whatever reason, the author, maybe he had friends with that name, but both books have a Felix and a Jack Crow. So my Felix, I took from those books because I love those books. The Wren came from Max Wren from Videodrome. So when you said Max Wren, it's like I didn't bother me, because it's like, well, I know that Jeffrey is a Cronenberg fan too, so that's probably subconsciously I'm sending that to him.
Oh my God. But it is funny how you and I kind of are attuned where we both have like a story, a dead stock. We
Right,
have
yeah.
a story out of the blue, and
Yeah.
we definitely think alike because we're both casting Ryan Gosling in
Yeah.
our.
Share
In
the
our
same brain on some. And the funny thing is like the stories are nothing alike. Like your dead stock is a Punktown novel, which is fantastic. My dead stock is a weird western. So it's like it's not even like the stories are similar. They're just we're obviously picking up each other's wavelengths on some level.
Mhm. Yeah,
So it's
Well,
great.
honestly, there's nothing wrong with casting Ryan Gosling in your head as
yeah,
a character because he's like he's almost like aside from being like that big muscular Arnold Schwarzenegger guy that can kick everyone's ass, I think he fits into the everyday sort of dude
Mhm.
persona really well.
Well, he's much more interesting. I mean, I think no one really wants that character. I think our flaws are the things that make us stand out, right? And that's why the
Absolutely, yeah.
yeah,
characters stand out. So I make Felix funny, but I don't really make him trite. And there's a reason why he's funny in my world. As you guys know, as you've read Sycamore, he's very upfront that it's a defense mechanism. They live in a world that's very dark and depressing. He doesn't look at the news. He makes sometimes like really inappropriate jokes, not offensive
Yeah.
jokes, but of the moment because this is how he keeps from, wanting to go home and slit his wrists or whatever. Because this is something that's a problem in this world. Like this is something palpable that's hanging over people's heads, living with this reality. And this was something when my manager has been trying to sort of, how can we successfully sell a Blacklands project? I said, well, forget about the stories. Forget about pitching any specific story or novel. Most of these guys have got families, they've got children. Imagine your kid has a nightmare. They think there's a monster under the bed or in their closet. You're going up to make them feel better. We've all been in that situation. I haven't. I don't have kids, but they've been in that situation. Imagine you live in a world where you can't do that because monsters exist.
yeah.
What are you now telling your child?
They're really
Mhm.
quick.
You can buy them if you want, but they're going to learn about the Blacklands in school eventually. So I mean, like, what do you do? So that was to me sort of like what I'm hoping would be the mind blowing moment, like, oh, this is what the Blacklands world could be as a franchise or an IP, whatever you want to call it. For me, it's always about the stories and the characters, but when I'm trying to sell a project to Hollywood, I have to kind of put the Hollywood pitch persona on and
Sure.
speak to them in that language. So for me, it's also very personal, and I love these stories, and that's where my heart lies. Um, I like working with film and TV, but for me, it's just like my heart is in my books. Like if I sell something to Hollywood, it's really just subsidizing my writing career. I'm not going to ever quit writing books. That's what I want to do. That's what I'll always do.
Yeah.
I love the how scary the concept of the Blacklands is because as you see in Sycamore, a portal can open anywhere. So there's going to people are going to be living under that stress constantly. If even if it's just in the back of their minds that they can't find firm footing on because anything can happen.
Mhm.
Any danger could just pop up right in your house, so to speak. And
Mhm.
and so you could see where Felix's sense of humor would be born partly of cynicism, like I said, partly as a defense mechanism. There's a touch of sadness to it, I feel,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
so it's he's not, like you said, he's not trite, he's not flippant. This is his kind of bitter kind of way to kind of express things in a way that uh, um, to deal with it, like you said, this very um, hostile and changing world, which you could look at it in all kinds of metaphorical ways.
Mhm.
The
Mhm.
sequences where he actually uh, enters the Blacklands were terrifying. They were
Yeah.
truly chilling, and you
That
didn't
was
know.
that was a scene I've had in my head for a very, very long time because I knew it was sort of like it was I don't know necessarily a game changer, but it was one where it's like this is where I'm really trying to turn on the horror. I knew it was going to be a very scary scene and scary for the character too. It was one thing where it's like if there's the beginning, there's the end, and you have to do those things. Well, that was the scene where it's like I can't screw this up. I have to make sure this scene is really good.
And for a full-length novel, it as opposed to the short stories, it called for that kind of payoff,
Mhm.
and you delivered with those
Yeah.
sequences. They were really chilling.
Well, and I did it kind of backwards, and I think you've done it sort of the same way too with your series. And again, I'm taking the cue from Punktown, where I did all the short stories and novellas first, and then it took me 10 years, 15 years to do the novel. I don't think you took that long to do your Punktown novels, but I believe you started with the short stories first and sort of went with there and built it. It's like I always saw them as kind of like trailers leading up to the main attraction, to the main feature. And for me, that was exactly what again, I really appreciate that you really get what I was trying to do with Sycamore because it was sort of like this was delivery on the promise I sort of made with those short stories. Of this is what a novel will be. I don't want it to be full of all these grand set pieces. I still want to really honor what Felix does as a character, but I do definitely need to deliver and justify why this is a novel and not another novella or whatever. So it needs to be grandiose without having huge explosions, and it's not like a superhero movie where it has to have all these giant set pieces and stuff and this sort of ridiculous action, because that's not a Felix story. It still needs to be a Felix story. I still wanted to have those kinds of scenes while still honoring what a Felix story should be. His stories are very much supernatural noirs. I'm really trying to honor my love of, Ross MacDonald, William Hortzberg's Falling Angel, even Clive Barker's Harry D'Amour stories, as much as I'm trying to honor like Robert B. Parker, Dashiell Hammett, the long, series of PI author fiction that we've had. But the other stories with other recurring characters are different. Like there's the Alice Baffle character that's introduced in Sycamore. I have ideas for series of novels with her, and hers are very much paranormal procedurals. They're like, what if Thomas Harris wrote horror novels instead of procedurals, right? So it's like, imagine Clarice Starling, instead of going to work for behavioral science, she went to work for the X-Files, So it's just, and again, for me, it's just really taking the supernatural, taking our world and dipping it in the supernatural. And the Jerry Baldwin character, the Felix's friend who sells haunted houses for a living, I literally just finished a new 30,000 word novella with him on Friday. And his stories are a little bit lighter. They're sort of like Elmore Leonard sort of capers. They're not funny because there's nothing really funny about this world. But again, that's the whole point of the series, is that even the stories tonally can be different. The Felix ones are supernatural noirs. The Alice Baffle ones are paranormal procedurals, whereas the Jerry Baldwin are kind of Elmore Leonard meets the Amityville Horror, sort of like, and they're just fun. Like he's got bus ads around the city because he's a real estate agent trying to sell haunted properties, and the slogan he has is "Put a little super into your natural life." And to me, that's the world. I've tried to put the super into this natural world that we all live in. Whereas, like, well, what if ghosts and monsters really existed? You're not going to bump into them when you walk down the street. Probably not. They're still fairly rare. I would say there are dozens of portals around the world, as opposed to hundreds, much less thousands. But they are there. We don't know how to get rid of them, and this is the world that we live in. And that was what I loved about Punktown. Is like, it's not even our world. Paxton is on another planet, and it's not even the only city. There's other cities. And I'm trying to remember if you set much. I don't. They're definitely referenced. I feel, is Osiris one of the other mega cities?
Minneosis. The planet is Oasis, and Minneosis is the other big city. It's larger than Punktown, but not as crime infested.
Right.
But I love what you're saying about how your series can be tonally different depending on who's the protagonist. That's exactly the kind of thing I try to do with Punktown. And there's so much freedom in that. You can write a story where the main thrust of it is it's a romance. And this one's a detective story. This one's a gangster story, and people, when they get used to that, then they'll accept it. They know that there's that flexibility in your setting and coming into it. And the more they read of your setting, they'll know that they'll give you that allowance. Whereas if somebody else, we're writing a series that was primarily science fiction, and then suddenly in one book in the series it becomes extremely horrific, maybe that might throw people for a loop. So the consistency of Punktown is that it's inconsistent, that it's not tonally, that it's
there's definitely connective tissue there that I saw between The New God and Monstrosity, where you're dealing with Lovecraftian horrors and cults. And again, I like that you but it's still not the same thing. That I love the idea of the virtual library that you introduced in The New God, and the idea that these things can infect you. It doesn't need to be a direct virus. It's like a mental thing. When people are starting to suffer from this thing, it's like, being in cyberspace is, there's no distance from you. You can still be infected by this thing. This is like an idea. It's like the movie Inception, where it starts with that line that an idea is like a virus. It can infect you. It can breed in your mind. And I thought that was something that for me was absolutely terrifying about The New God. Was no, he's okay. It's virtual. He's just in cyberspace. It's like Johnny Mnemonic, right? It's like no, he's fine. Once he jacks out, he'll be it's completely harmless. So when you see this, and then you really understand what the stakes are with what's happening with literally with this new god, it starts off as sort of this concept that this character is trying to use to sort of to fight the old ones, and of course, things go sideways, and and of course the best way possible that these things do. But again, very very unique. I've never seen that before, in much less in Punktown, or even like the Cosmic Menace type stories.
Yeah. Speaking of uniqueness, you have some pretty interesting things that happen in the new God, Jeffrey. There's some creatures that just after I read it, I had to go back and read them again because they were just so far out there. Uh, I'm thinking of the slug person. I don't want to give too much away because it
Mm.
hit me as a surprise, and I was just like, "Oh my god, that was brilliant!" How do you like when you? I noticed with your Punktown novels, as you were saying, they're very sort of diverse in content. They're not always the same, and so you're not always going to get creatures like that. But but when you do come up with a creature, how do you approach creating something that's just like something you've never seen before?
Wow. Well, I'm big into body horror,
Mm.
so that's a lot to do with it. And also, I'm an artist, and I think that maybe I think in visual terms, and um, I will say that again, the basic setup for the story was from Brian Sammons, um, and I kind of saw me writing the novel as he's the game master. Here's the setup. Now, where are you going to go with it? Now it's up to you to take these characters and it's up to you to wrap it up and make them, send them through their paces. But this is the basic setup. In Brian's scenario in the Punktown role playing guidebook, the creatures there's a lot of creatures, but they're straight out of Lovecraft. Like
Hmm.
the creature in the club field part in the beginning is the character changes and he becomes, in the game scenario, he becomes Yogolanak from Ramsey Campbell's like a old one that Ramsey Campbell came up with.
Mm.
And so there was a lot of that, the Shoggoths and Night Gaunts or whatever, and all this, the Lovecrafting. Brian did that to show the prospective players that you can incorporate all these Lovecraftian elements in this way if you want to. So he really loaded the scenario with that kind of stuff to show people interested in running those games how, like I say, how many Lovecraftian entities and elements they could incorporate it if they so desired. But when I came to write the book, I didn't want to reference Lovecraft's inventions that closely. So there's actually very little of that. It's a Lovecraftian story, cosmic gods and all that. They're alluded to, but I didn't want to use all the actually used Lovecraftian creatures and elements. So that's why I came up with things like that slug creature and the character in Club Field in the beginning. He turns into something monstrous, but it's not strictly a Lovecraftian creation, a
Yeah.
Lovecraft creation. It's
That
a
beginning
Lovecraft.
is just insane too. That
Mhm.
what happens at the very start of the story.
Yeah.
It's like, what? It's like, did I accidentally drink something hallucinogenic here?
Yeah.
For me, it's just like you sort of know what you're going to get, but you also don't know what you're going to get with a Jeffrey Thomas story. So it's like,
Yeah.
again, I think the last one I had read was Red Cells. So I'm thinking, okay, well, so I'm very curious to see what I'll remember, because I've got a good memory in some ways. In other ways, it's just, I'll forget it. I'll forget a character name, but I'll be like, oh, hey, cool, the color Shrain is referenced, or hey, there's a health agent, because Health Agent was one of my favorite Punktown novels, because it was like kind of like X-Files meets Outbreak. It was just like you've got these agents and their whole job is to contain biological vectors and stuff, and it's like that's realistic. That's what you would have when you've got all these different species mingling. You would have viruses. Health
Yeah.
agents would be a thing. So it was just something that each each story was so creative, but so organic to the world and the setting. It was just like, maybe that's why I liked it. It was like, oh, this makes sense, and even as much as these stories make sense, he's the author, Thomas is still surprising you. So there was that element to me where it was like, even when I'm seeing something familiar, like, oh, hey, he references the bedbugs, who might be my favorite of all of the creatures in Punktown. That was, I get to write about the bedbugs in my Punktown story, Bedbug Radio and Transmissions from Punktown. But I don't know what he's going to do with them. You know, they might be a minor part, as they are in the New God, or that might be a bigger part. And even if they are, I'm still going to find out something different. They're going to do something that's unexpected, because Jeff's gonna lull you a little bit. Oh yeah, you know Punktown, sort of, but then he's gonna turn it on its head. It's just that's what I like about it. It's just you're comfortable and uncomfortable at the same time in all of the best ways.
Yeah.
And that's to me, that's when you're in the hands of a master. I don't want to stroke the ego too much, but that's what we're here for. And it was such a joy. It was just, especially at this time with all this stuff going on, it's a book that I recommended to a lot of people, and reminding me of how much I love Punktown. It's like, oh yeah, this is. I always try and boost other authors, because, well, I don't try to, I do it because I love other authors and their stories. But it's like, oh, it's been a little while since I've recommended Punktown, because we haven't had a Punktown book for a little while. And it was just like, oh yeah, you've got to read the New God, and then you have to read this. It's just this. I want to give people like a Punktown starter pack, and just tell them it's like here's a care package. Just digest all of this, because it's going to be different. It's all going to be fantastic. It's not any one thing. It's like, oh, if you like that, you'll like this. If you like Lovecraftian stuff, read Monstrosity and then read New God, or then go to, if you like military stuff and you like, sort of like war stories, read Blue Planet, because there's some Blue Planet references in New God as well too. And again, it's like revisiting, old stomping grounds. It's like meeting up with old friends. That's one of the things I loved about the New God so much.
You do have a short collection of Punktown stories called Welcome to Punktown. Is that somewhere where you would say somebody could start reading Punktown?
Yeah, actually, yeah, I bundled a bunch of chapbooks of again, stories that had been previously published, and I wanted to do something with them. And instead of putting them into kind of a thick anthology, I followed the lead of writer William Michael, who bundles like 3 stories and sell them as a chapbook series. And so I copied that idea. So I put together a few Punktown chapbooks like that. And so one of those chapbooks would be a good, one of those Punktown chapbooks that has only 3 stories might be a good entry point for people who haven't read it before, and to kind of just want to kind of get a taste first, get their feet wet, and to see if they want to read something larger. But yeah, Welcome to Punktown, and there's a couple others that I think that is actually a good idea as a starting point.
It almost sounds like come here and check these stories out.
Yeah.
And if you like it, there's a lot more.
Yeah.
It's a good sampler. Like even the title itself, and obviously
Yeah.
that's sort of the intent, but it's a good little sampler. Like, I mean, I say just go whole hog, buy the first Punktown collection, and go right from there. But I mean, that's for me. I mean, obviously, I think there's a lot there that even ideas that you haven't even developed, that could be developed in longer work, but you don't need to. You're seeing a slice of life in all of these stories in that collection, and then other ones, some of those stories are explored in greater depth in the novel series. But again, you could pick up whatever you want, in my opinion, and start wherever you want, whether it's anything like Everybody Scream or Health Agent or Monstrosity or New God. And all I know is that, in my opinion, once you read one, you're going to want everything else, because that's how I am with a series that I like. It's funny because we were talking about series and how do you get people to buy the first one. Usually it's just like, will they start with you from the beginning? Well, they will if they think they're going to get more books right away, but some people won't even start a series until they know you've got 2 or 3 out. And that's something that I think is really great with Cemetery Dance. Even Spotify, who's doing the audiobooks for Blacklands, they seem pretty invested. Like there's only 2 books scheduled. Obviously I've got other stuff going and stuff that I'm working on. They seem that they're in it for the long haul, because they know it takes a few books. And when the second book comes out, the first book will get a resurgence, right? So I think with the Punktown series, it's the same thing, where it's just it's like a gateway drug. You get a little taste, and then you're going to want the whole thing, and then suddenly you're going to be an addict. But it's healthy, so it's not heroin. It's just really, really good stories.
So still take it for a weird trip.
Exactly.
Definitely a weird trip. Yeah.
And I'm happy that there are short stories and novels as there is now for you you, Ian,
Mm.
because there are, of course, people who they'll only read novels. They're not interested in short stories. Then there are other people who favor short stories over novels, and so you're giving people a choice if they are so inclined to lean one way or the other. Myself, I've always got a short story collection and a novel that I'm reading. You know, I like to alternate.
Yeah.
I love both forms. But
Well, I think it was somebody who said like it's not you know, it's not about good reviews or bad reviews. Like the real enemy of any writer is obscurity. And it's when they're not talking about you. So that was something where it's just like as long as you've got short stories and novels coming out and that they're out there and they're still in print, people can find you anywhere. And it's like little breadcrumbs. And they're not necessarily led in a straight line. They're sort of scattered to the winds. But if they find you, they can still lead back to you and lead to more stories. Like I can't tell you how many people have been like, oh, I read this short story, like in the Ellen Datlow collection. That was a big coup for me, right? That was Tor Nightfire's very first anthology. And to have the story at the very beginning of it was great. And I can't talk about a lot of the details, but the Blacklands movie that we're shopping, the guys who wrote the screenplay or who've written the treatment for it, that's the story, and that's how they found it. They found that through there. They became fans of me. They knew about the Blacklands. That was their introduction to it. So it works, you know, like it works when it comes to finding people that way. And even when you're talking to, and I'm sure you've had your dealings with the Hollywood people too, Jeff.
Oh yes.
It's always, I can never tell what's more exciting when it's these people are reading your work, or you have a meeting with someone and they already know your work. You know, it's very, very cool because you never know when your stories are going to fall into someone's hands. It's certainly not why I'm doing it. So, oh hey, you know, I had a meeting with Jason Bateman and he's a fan of my work. That's cool. I like that. But it's not why I'm doing it. It's just it's a cool side of it. I'm doing it because I love it. You know, like I love telling stories. I love to be able to do what I want. Anything else that I get from that is just a really cool side benefit. You know, like it's just, and the people that I've got to meet. Like I remember I got to meet you, Jeff, at a ReaderCon one year, and believe me, I was so nervous because it was like one of my very first conventions where I was meeting you. I was meeting like Elizabeth Hand. I was meeting Laird Barron and all these people. Everyone's super nice. I've never met a bad person out there. Everyone is really great. They sign my books, but more than anything, they were treating me as a friend and a contemporary, even though I hadn't really done anything. It's a great community, and that's one of the things I love about being a writer. It's being able to write these stories and being able to sort of say, hey, you know, I was doing this because of someone like, you know, Jeffrey Thomas when I discovered him back in the 90s. You know, it's a really cool connection. And then I got to meet him in person 10 years later.
That's awesome.
Awesome. I love it.
Yeah. Just want to say quickly here, James Fetchko, he's been watching my channel for years now. He says he didn't even know about the new God book, and he just reread all the Jeffrey Thomas stuff that he had a few months ago. Well, you're just gonna have to add that now. Actually, I think he did say that he bought it. Yeah, getting it now. Yeah.
You know, we have to talk about. We haven't talked about it at all. It's the one thing that I don't have because I couldn't afford it at the time. And again, if the Netflix movie gets made and there's an Every House is Haunted update I'm supposed to be getting any time now. I said, like, if I get my giant paycheck and make this movie, I said, I've already told my wife, she's already cool with it. I said, I'm going on the secondary market. I'm buying the cemetery or the Centipede Press Punktown Omnibus. There's still every now and again a copy of these 3 books that ended up on that goes up on eBay. But can you talk a bit about how that happened? And like, it's a collection of all the stories, and I believe there's a few new ones in there. I just want it, even if it was all reprints, I would still want it because it was
nice. I have to give credit to Michael Sisko, the writer Michael Sisko. He put a bug in the ear of Jared Walters of Century Press years ago. He's saying like you should do some kind of a collection of Jeffrey Thomas's work. And then a Facebook friend of mine, Donald Cobb, had mentioned years later. He had mentioned to Jared Walters that he should do a collection of Punktown stories. So Gerard looked into that. We had met at a Necronomicon, and I don't know if Gerard had remembered that or not. But based on Donald Cobb reminding him about my work and seconding Michael Sisko's suggestion that he put together something of mine, we started talking about doing an omnibus of Punktown stories. So that's what we started doing. We put together all the Punktown stories at that time into 3 massive volumes, each with a foreword by somebody different. And of course, there's been more Punktown stories since then. But it's a beautiful a beautiful collection, a huge collection of 3 beautiful volumes, and it sold out like in no time. And I got a nice paycheck from that too. You know, I
Well,
got
they
an
make these
advance.
gorgeous books, like the giant oversized books. I've
Oh,
got I've got the
it's,
Stephen King Salem's Lot with all the deleted scenes from that book, which is just incredible. I mean,
That
a
would be
beautiful book.
awesome.
You know, I love having the extras. I mean, like I love the deluxe hardcovers. And again, it's not as a collector. Like I would never resell these. These are my babies. But I always love the extras. I think of them as like special edition DVDs when you get all the cool features and
yeah,
like here's the audio commentary track. Here's the alternate ending. So I love the fact that they're signed. But for
yeah.
me, it's always the extra features. So
The
that's the
Sympathy Press books are treasures. They're really beautiful.
hmm
So that was thrilling.
nice.
I regret that, I sometimes miss out on these things because uh like I was saying earlier that books I live in a fairly small space, and books have completely taken over. I have nowhere else to put
Yeah,
them. So I've been selling a lot of my books, and because I want to get more, but then you think about it, it's like, am I just going to sell those too,
hmm
yeah.
Yeah,
It's
that's how I feel. That's sort of like I'm at the point now where it's like, yeah, I'm probably not going to be able to read everything that I own, but of course, it's not going to stop me from still buying more.
yeah,
I
Yeah.
exactly.
urge a bit more. Like if I read a book and I'm not going to probably read it again, and it doesn't have a real personal significance to me, I'm more inclined to sell it or donate it to a library. I've done that much at least just to make some space. Because yeah, even in my office, you can see a bit of it on the camera. Every wall is bookshelves except for that one over there, and it's still like a half well, and that's only because I left. That's a framed copy of my very first book, the Dust Echo book. But that's it. Like even the you can see below it the Evil Dead poster. That's the signed Evil Dead poster I got after Sam Raimi
Oh,
optioned
nice.
Every House is Haunted, and I still don't have a place to hang it. It's framed, and I move it around the office because there's nowhere to hang it. You know, I have no more wall space. So,
I know I can relate to that totally. And just like you said, Ian, I'm sure I'm never going to. There's no doubt about it. I'm never going to read every book I have, but that does not stop me from ordering. I
Yeah.
ordered a book today. You know.
yeah, no, and I love them. Books are great. I'm a book. I love movies and I'm not a luddite. I love movies and TV too. I watch a lot, but it's even and again, let's face it, with postal prices these days, it's hard to buy a lot of books because everything's expensive. So like
Yeah.
my first my debut novel came out last year, Family from Earthling Publications, and a lot of people, especially in my family circle, couldn't afford it because it's the book the shipping's almost as much as the book in some cases, depending
Yeah.
on where you live. Um, but they want to support me, and of course, the idea is that I love the deluxe editions. I'm always trying to make sure that there's a more affordable, trade paperback or an ebook edition.
Yeah.
There isn't always the case. Again, my real fight is with obscurity. I want to make sure I've got books out because I went 10 years with having nothing out. Every House is Haunted came out in 2012, and then there was nothing for years, and people either thought maybe I've retired or I'm dead. And it was like, no, I'm still there. I'm still doing stuff, but I hadn't really sold anything until I really, started going back into the smaller presses. I was trying to sell stuff to the big five,
Mhm.
and lots of nice rejections, but I wasn't selling anything. So it looked like I wasn't around. So in 2023, I decided to start really reconnecting with the smaller presses again. So I reached out to people like Earthling and PS and Cemetery Dance, and that year I sold 5 books, and it
Ah,
was just,
wonderful.
It
I'm
was a
kind of
big year, yeah.
well, I was back, but then on the other hand, on the other way, it's like I wasn't really away. I hadn't really gone anywhere. It was
Mhm.
just trying to sort of, take control of my own writerly destiny, I guess, and get this stuff out there and trying to make sure that, even if they are the more expensive deluxe hardcovers and some people may not be able to buy them, at least it's, something is better than nothing. And I'll still have my agent working on trying to sell those rights to like the big five or whoever. We might do a more accessible, affordable trade paperback edition. It's hybridizing. Like you're trying to be like the hybrid writer. That's I think how you have to succeed these days. You have to do a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I write full time, but selling books is actually pays the least amount for me. I work in video games. I do film and TV. I do graphic novels, comics, and stuff.
Mhm.
And like I said, ironically, it's the book stuff that pays usually the least amount. It's
And
Yeah.
that's like your favorite avenue of
Oh
writing.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the irony of it, right? That's why I say it's sort of like the film and TV stuff obviously is what pays the most, but it really just subsidizes my writing career. You see, that's a world where you really have to take it with a grain of salt. You can have your heart broken if you're really going to get emotionally invested because it's so hard to get anything made. Every House is Haunted was optioned years ago, And between the pandemic and then the streaming wars, it just keeps getting delayed. Now it keeps getting re-auctioned. Obviously they want to make it. If they weren't interested, they would just not renew it. But they've renewed it multiple times. I've had Zoom conversations with Raimi himself. They've been very good about keeping me in the loop. I'm working as a consultant on the film, but they're also just good people who are really care about the project. So it's I think it's going to happen. It's a very, very weird world these days in terms of film and TV. It's in terms of what gets made or how it's the landscape has changed quite a bit, but I'm confident that it will get made. But that's how you have to survive as a writer these days. If you're going to try to make any kind of a living at it, you have to do a little bit of everything.
Absolutely, yeah.
And like you're saying, Ian, I've had a couple of books sold to a larger publisher, like a Solaris Books.
Right.
But I also work with small publishers too, because like you said, you sprinkle the crumbs around. Maybe nobody's going to read all your work, but maybe they'll find this story in this anthology. It may or may not lead them to read more of your work, but at least somebody found you there. Somebody else is going to find you over here. So cumulatively, you're finding an audience. It's just kind of spread out. And some people are going to read that book that they're going to find in the library. One of the greatest thrills of my life was going in the library in my childhood home of Westboro, Massachusetts, going in there just randomly and looking through the science fiction section and finding my book Deadstock. I was thrilled. It was one of the greatest thrills of my life because I grew up in that library and I didn't ask them to order that book. There it was in my hometown library.
Nice.
You're going to have a book like that you're going to be able to find readily. And then maybe you never will again, but maybe, there's going to be stories sprinkled in these anthologies or this New God from a relatively small publisher. And there's your audience. It's just kind of spread out. And like you said, hybrid, like a hybrid career. It's as you say, it's probably, it's a more realistic way to pursue it.
Well, and you're doing what I'm doing at the end of the day. It's not like it's this cold clinical plan of attack or we're trying to do this. I was like, no. At the end of the day, what being a hybrid writer about is not giving up. You're being creative. You're not stifling that creativity. You're not trying to put a cap on that passion. You're trying to find different avenues to express yourself and get your name out there. It's not marketing. It's just, this is the global village. It's great. Everyone's got a platform. The downside is everyone's got a platform. It signals a noise, right? Like, how do I boost my signal in an organic way that's not going to annoy people? It's also still very genuine.
Yeah.
One thing that you can do that Jeffrey does that I'm trying to do is you be yourself. You're writing something that's really unique. It has to be sort of codified or quantified in some certain way to describe it in a few sentences. But the part that's unique is yourself. That's the thing that makes it special. So it sounds so cheesy to say, well, just be true to yourself, be true to your passion. But that's really what you need to do if you really want to stand out in this world where everyone's trying to do stuff and make themselves stand out. It's stay true to yourself, stay true to your heart, and be confident. It's hard. There's a lot of days when I've got that deal with imposter syndrome and I don't believe in myself. But that too does pass, and you just have to keep going back and just not give up. As long as you're enjoying yourself. If you're not taking any joy from it, feel free to quit. Like you don't have to do anything, but if you still feel joy from it, then don't give up.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's no better feeling for me than to have that project going. I start to get kind of like despondent if I don't have a project going, and that's the joy that you speak of. Having that once when you're in that mode, when you're in that mindset, it's just such a good feeling. It's indescribable and incomparable.
Well, let me tell you when I was talking about how like I said, the state of the world and stuff that I was going through with my family, my wife's family, like author friend who passed away earlier this year. Like it's been a lousy start to the year, and I just decided that it's okay to be upset, it's okay to be depressed. And that was the thing that actually drove me to finish this novella, this Black Lens novella that I've been chipping away at for eight months. I hadn't really written anything new. I've been busy. I've been doing deadlines for other things, and I just hadn't really felt like it, which is fine if you don't feel like it, you don't do it. But I ended up writing like 10,000 words last week. I finished the damn thing. Got a really great call from my agent on Friday about something I can't even talk about. It could end up being a huge maybe large, maybe I don't want to tease, but it could be like one of the biggest things happening for my writing career if it happens. Don't want to jinx it, but it was cool and it was exciting. But I was at the moment I was more excited about finally finishing something, and I wanted to finish it because the next thing I'm working on is another Blacklands novella, but it's a Felix Wren one, and it's the bridge book. It's a bridge novella between Sycamore and Miss Paranormal, which is the second Felix Wren novel. You don't need to have read that to understand it. They still functions as a standalone. It really sort of explores Felix's fear of the dark that he sort of acquires and sort of gets over in Sycamore. But it's sort of like my last word on that experience from Sycamore. And it had a great title, what I think is a great title that I've had for a long time, because it's sort of it's a literary reference, but it's also pure Blacklands. And I don't mind announcing it right here. So it's going to be called The Sun Never Rises. So
The Sun Never Rises. Excellent.
Which is just pure Blacklands to me. So again, it's something that it's a standalone story. In my mind, I picture it as, well, if I still wanted to do these old Felix Wren chapbooks, which is how I started writing the Blacklands books, that's what this one would be. It would be a Blacklands chapbook that fits in neatly between Sycamore and book 2. Again, you don't need to read it to understand. It's not a prerequisite, but I love having these in between stories that tell their own little story, references this, and ushers the way to the next one. But you can read it out of order. You don't need to read it at all to enjoy the next book. But that's something that's got me excited this year about keeping passion going and keeping writing, even amid everything that's going on in the world right now in our country and everything.
Yeah, it's kind of scary right now. I'd be remiss though. I mean, there's things that can keep us happy and like reading and writing. But I'd be remiss if I didn't welcome our new guest who jumped up onto your lap and is like promptly went right to sleep. Who is that there with you?
This is Barnabas, and actually I'm surprised. I apologize for the little cameo appearance, but
oh no, that's fine.
I'm actually surprised he's not here sooner. Usually it's like he hears me going on a call, and he's like, "Oh, there's Ian's on. I better go be there. I need to make my special appearance." So
I love just how casually he walked up. I saw him come in, and then he just jumps up and jumps on your lap. And then promptly goes to sleep.
Well, we've been super close to our cats. Again, more sadness here. One of our cats passed away a couple of weeks ago, Gozer.
Yeah.
He was our youngest cat. He was only 6 years old, and he just suddenly got really
that's not good,
horrible like kidney issues, which were unforeseen. He was sick on Sunday. We had to put him down by Friday, and we're still pretty devastated. It was only a couple of weeks ago. And I think we'd just be complete wrecks if it wasn't for our other little guys who have sort of rallied. The cats, I think all animals, but I think cats especially can sort of sense it. So they've just been really around, and it's just it's been tough, man. It's just like it's February now, but it's been a tough start to the year. I was really thankful to be talking to you guys tonight, because I think sort of hanging out in my dark office by myself is what I don't need right now. I need to hang out with my people, talk to my friends. So this has been fantastic.
It was really good for me too, because my weekend was a mixture of really good things happening and really bad things happening. And there was a period today where I was like, I think I'm just going to cancel because I just can't get my head out of this bad space. And then I went to the questions I had prepared for you, Jeffrey, and I was like, you know what, this is pulling me out of that, and this is making everything better. So I'm just going to keep keep going. Yeah.
I always hear my wife's voice in my head, because whenever I'm the same thing. I'm not antisocial, but I'm definitely a homebody. And when I think about not socializing, it's if my wife isn't telling me directly, I'm maybe hearing her voice in her head, because she's way smarter than I am, and she always gives me the best advice. Like, no, you're going to do that. And so it was the same thing. Is that if I didn't feel like doing this tonight, obviously I didn't want to let you down. I didn't want to let Jeff down. But I went and I looked at my own notes for the new God, which I had taken while I was reading the book, and I was like, oh, I'm really looking forward to talking.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what happened to me too. I was like, this is going to be awesome. Why am I thinking about canceling? It's like, wake up, man.
It's good. We need those distractions,
Absolutely,
to stay sane.
Well, I want to thank both Jeffrey and Ian for coming on and discussing the new God. And Jeffrey, before we go, is there anything that you got coming out soon that we can look forward to?
I have another book coming from Weird House Press called The Knot.
The Knot. And
that's in a series that is related to Punktown. It's in this Punktown universe, but it doesn't take place in Punktown. It takes place at a time where the humans of Earth are trying to establish long distance teleportation.
Mhm.
And the Punktown stories are the results of the rewards of the long distance teleportation. But I've written 3 novels in this kind of side series
Mhm.
that revolve around a character named Captain Robert Fuseli. The first was The Exploded Soul that came out last year from Weird House Press. This new book, The Knot, is the follow-up to that. Again, you don't have to read one to enjoy the other, but the Knot is the second in the series. And then there's a third longer novel that the publisher is going to be looking at. And
Sweet.
so that would be the next book to come out is The Knot. It's a science fiction horror blend adjacent to Punktown.
Awesome. And is there a release date for that, or did I?
I'm not sure. It should be fairly soon, though.
Okay, awesome. And Ian, do you have anything that's coming out relatively soon that you can talk about?
I've got 2 books coming out this year. The one that'll be out sooner, I'm thinking this spring or summer. I can't actually say, it hasn't been announced, but it's with a really cool small press that we all know. I can't say anything yet. The signature sheets were just delivered yesterday. I can tell you that there's an awesome introduction by Gemma Files. I don't think that's spoiling anything.
Nice.
That's phenomenal because I love her. I love her work, and I've known her for a very long time. So it was a real honor and joy to have her introduce this book. It's a standalone horror novel. It's not a Blacklands book, although I would say maybe there's connections. It's definitely not a Blacklands book, but I would say in the same way that sort of Stephen King has this kind of shared universe,
Yeah.
and maybe there are little inklings of, say, like a Dark Tower story in a book that's not a Dark Tower book. I would say that maybe there are kind of connections to the Blacklands. Again, you don't need to know them to enjoy it. And then later this year, I've got the reprint of Supernatural Tales coming out from Cemetery Dance. And the hope is that between that one and the official book 2, I would like to get this Blacklands novella out, this Jerry Baldwin one, with another Jerry Baldwin novella, sort of a haunted house real estate stories. I would like to collect them as sort of like a double bill, like a Blacklands double feature. You know, it's just a short book. You know, a little taster to hold you over until Felix novel 2 comes out. And because it's real estate themed, because it's haunted houses, I'm thinking I would like to call it "If You Died Here, You'd Be Home by Now." So as like a play on those real estate ads where, hey, if you lived here, you'd be home by now. So I was like, well, this is horror, so he's selling haunted houses. So if you died here, you'd be home by now. It's like, it's gold. It's right there. That's the perfect time. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, that's what I've got cooking this year.
All right, awesome. Well, I want to thank everyone who came, and I want to thank everyone who is going to be here in the future and listening in. And I want to thank Jeffrey. Thank you for so much for coming on and discussing all this. And thank you, Ian, for coming along too. I'm glad this idea worked out and that it was, I think, quite successful. I had a lot of fun. And
it's a real treat. I'm glad we can honor Jeff and just get the insight on this book. It's
I appreciate
great
all
book. People should pick it up immediately. You know.
Thank you so much. You guys making I think I'm going to float away shortly.
And Jeffrey, you're welcome to come back anytime. And I might even ring you up when one of your new releases comes out, and we'll talk again if you're interested.
I'd definitely be up for that.
All right. Thanks, everyone. And we will catch you all again next time.
All right. Take care. Thanks again.